Hey all, Ryan here with Millennial Tech Zone. And I've come with this realization with, by the way, plenty of help with my friends and my family members that I'm a bit of a serial interviewer. In fact, I've actually interviewed with, I think, around six or so sales engineer positions over the last couple of months. And over my career, I would say I probably have interviewed for north of 20 different SC positions. Because personally, I find interviewing as a way to keep my skills sharp as a professional in the industry, as well as see what else is out there that I might potentially be interested. Even if it's not now, I'm creating a relationship that could probably be leveraged in the future potentially. So I thought I'd share a little bit about what I've learned to be successful for interviewing for an SE position. But before that, a little bit about me. So again, my name's Ryan. I've been a sales engineer for the last 7 or 8 years or so. I've held pretty much every role imaginable that you can think of when it comes to being an SE. I started on the inside, which basically means you don't travel. You're tied to inside sales reps. I've been in the field as a commercial sales engineer for a cybersecurity organization where I covered the entire country. I worked in the channel, so I worked with channel partners with a distributor, so to grow our channel business. And more recently, I'm switching over to another field-based role that focuses on commercial as well as enterprise accounts. So again, I want to leverage my experience for all of you to help equip you to be prepared for you interviewing for a sales engineer position. And to do that, I came up with these top 8 tips to equip all of you for an upcoming SC role. So let's get into it. All right, so tip number 1. This is my very first tip, and it has less to do with the interview process and more to do with helping you actually get an interview in the first place. And that's all about reviewing your resume and your LinkedIn profile, so recruiters can actually identify that you're a fit for the role. Honestly, I would say this can be a whole video in itself, and maybe I will do a video on this in the future. But if you're looking to land a traditional SE type role, your resume and LinkedIn profile need to reflect that. It needs to reflect the experience with the common job functionalities of that of a typical sales engineer. So let's take an example, right? So a sales engineer's responsibility is all about relaying technology in an easy to understand and relatable manner to the point where the customer can see the benefit of having that solution to solve for some sort of pain point, some sort of problem that's been a thorn on their side for a while, right? So you might list on your resume your experiences like talking to customers and your ability to explain technology in an easy to understand fashion. So as an example, let's say you were in a help desk role. Your customers are the employees of the organization. List references, list bullet points about how you were able to relay technology within the organization to make your customers, make your employees understand the technology and the benefit of that. If you've actually held a previous sales or a sales engineer position, that's even better for you. You should definitely highlight those experiences. So experiences of doing things like demonstrations, proof of concepts, achieving quota, maybe experiences with different CRM solutions, relationship building, as well as anything that made you stand out within your team that makes you a little bit different than what your typical person going for the role. So for me, as an example, I like to create content. So I would list how I create different content and maybe even provide a couple of links to the content that I've created already. If you're new to the SE role, try and highlight your technology experiences that relate to the technology of the company you're applying for. So in other words, if you're applying to a company like a Zscaler that offers networking solutions, list on your resume your networking experience. If you have any sort of certifications, make sure to list that. Anything that relates to the technology you should have on your resume as well as your LinkedIn profile. From what I've seen from my experience talking to plenty of hiring managers out there, they're looking for someone that either already has that pre-sales background or somebody that already has the expertise to understand the technology, so there's not going to be a long ramp up time. If you don't have either of those, unless you're a very driven person and they can sense that from you, chances are you're going to have a low chance of being hired for that role. Also, don't forget your LinkedIn profile. This is super, super important. I actually had a recruiter provide me suggestions for updating my LinkedIn profile. And when I did, I kid you not, my recruiters reaching out to me increased at least tenfold by making some changes. So make sure you add the same items we're talking about to your resume, to your LinkedIn profile as well. And then within LinkedIn, there's a little button there that says you're open to finding job opportunities. Make sure you select that, because if you don't have that selected, chances are recruiters aren't gonna reach out to you as often as if you did not have that selected, right? All right, so tip number 2. This tip can be a little polarizing, but from my experience, it's important to discuss your salary expectations immediately with the recruiter. I've ran into situations in which I failed to disclose exactly what I would require to leave my current employer. And once I received the official offer, it was actually under or equal to, or around equal to, what I'm currently getting paid. So please take this from me, learn from my mistakes. Interviewing can be an exhausting process. It takes a lot out of you. It's emotionally draining as you get excited for a new role. So my advice is to immediately give the range of what you're looking to take for the role. Maybe start at the higher end a little bit, but have a decent range there. And trust me, the recruiters will appreciate the honesty. They'll tell you right away if it aligns with the role they're looking to hire from. That way, if you do go through the process and you do get the offer, it's going to be within range of what you're hoping for, so it doesn't waste anybody's time. Tip 3 is to do your research before actually having that initial call with the hiring manager. So if you're interviewing for a sales engineer position, typically you'll talk to the recruiter first. And this interview is all about identifying if you're a right fit for the role. So they'll ask you questions like your background, do you have any pre-sales experience? They'll give you an idea of the team, of the organization, the company you're actually hiring for. And if they deem you are potentially a good fit for the role, they'll send your resume over to the hiring manager, and that will be your next interview. This, in my opinion, is probably the most important interview of the entire process. And that's because this is the actual person that would be your manager and the person making the decision whether or not they're going to hire you. So again, you should really go in with a very good first impression. So to prepare for this, there are 3 main factors. So tip 3 main within tip 3 as well, is to do a little research about the organization. So first is understand the company. So go on the website, go to the company's About Us page, maybe spend 15 to 30 minutes looking up on their website, their mission statement, their values, the type of solutions they offer, the type of customers that they're currently in, or the verticals they're trying to target. So do some high level understanding of the actual company itself. You can also rely on the recruiter for this. So recruiters are typically trained to give an elevator pitch about the organization. So you can always reach out to the recruiter to get a better understanding about the company and the values and the culture and so on and so forth. So never feel afraid to actually reach out to the recruiter for assistance. They're going to be on your side. They're going to be your champion throughout the entire journey of the interview process. So second is to do some research about the actual hiring manager. So go on LinkedIn, type in his or her name, look at their experiences in the industry, because as human beings, we have a tendency to like to talk about ourselves. And some of the best interviews that I've ever had was because I asked the right questions about the actual hiring manager's experiences. So they went into very detail about how they ended up where they are today, their journey to get there. And it really provided perspective for me and really understanding for me what they think of the organization they're currently at and how they ended up there. So definitely do your research about the hiring manager. The last thing I want to leave you with for tip number 3 is to do a little research about the technology solution that the company is actually offering. So I've done everything from, I'll spend some time watching maybe a YouTube demo so I can actually see how somebody else demos a solution. I'll take a look at the website and look at their product page so I have an idea of the different offerings that they have. If they have some sort of trial, that's really great with SaaS applications, is oftentimes they have a try for free option. I'll go in, I'll play around with it for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more if I think the technology is really interesting. And I'll tell you what, if you go in to that initial interview with the hiring manager and you actually told them you watched a demo, you tried and played around with the software, you're going to have a huge edge over anyone else who's also interviewing for the position that didn't take these steps. So definitely recommend doing your research, testing out the technology before you even have that initial interview with the hiring manager. Tip 4, practice your personal elevator pitch. What I mean by this is every hiring manager will ask you about your past experiences. So your response to this really sets the tone for the entire conversation moving forward. So it's important for you to go and prepare to share about yourself. For example, I recently interviewed and I accepted a role for an identity verification company. And as a part of my personal elevator pitch, I walked them through my career journey, highlighted experiences that I knew would be more relevant to the role that I was interviewing for, specifically around the technology. And I even touched upon some of my own personal experiences outside of work. And I will say this is something a lot of people commonly lack, is your personal experiences, there are things outside of work can be just as relevant as your work experiences. It can also strike commonalities that you may have with the actual hiring manager that branches off into really fun conversations, which just leaves a good mood for the entire interview. So things that I've talked about before is, I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations where I volunteer. So I'll talk about those experiences. I have a few side gigs that I'm passionate about. So I tend to always bring those up and it always stems questions. And, I'm passionate about it. So I love answering those questions and walking them through that journey. Maybe any sort of struggles you've overcome that really tell the hiring manager who you are as a human being and why you are how you are. Maybe even some hobbies that drive you as a person, things outside of work that you're passionate about. Again, I always like to say we're all human, and sharing these experiences can really help you connect during the interview process. And this is as important as your experience and your relevancy to being a fit for the role, is ensuring that the hiring manager actually likes you as a person, right? So definitely, practice that elevator pitch, and that way, you go in feeling comfortable about sharing about yourself. Tip number 5, practice, practice, practice. So this one may not be relevant for every single SE position, every single SE interview that's out there, but from my experiences, I'd say probably four out of 5 or so SE roles that I've actually interviewed for have some sort of tech challenge, demo requirement, maybe a technology conversation. And this is all to gauge your experiences. You may even have a component of the interview where you have to demo your tech challenge. So you have to be prepared for that. And again, I can do a whole video on this discussion as well, but this is very dependent on the company you're interviewing for, how we have this conversation. But my takeaway is if you're asked to demo some sort of technology, complete some sort of tech challenge, or maybe have a technical conversation with another sales engineer on the team, make sure you go in prepared and you go in and you actually complete the challenge or the demo requirement accordingly. If you do well in this aspect of the interview, chances are you'll get a job offer. At this point, the hiring manager already likes you. They want to test your technical aptitude. So if you do well within the actual tech challenge, within the tech conversation, again, you'll probably get the offer. By the way, one thing I want to highlight, and one thing I've noticed as somebody who's interviewed other people before, is don't be afraid to ask questions. The hiring manager is there to really provide clarity, direction. They might even point you in the direction of things to specifically focus on, so you have an idea and they have an idea of what your technical aptitude and your ability to learn is. So if you don't have a lot of direction going into it, never be afraid to reach out to the hiring manager or the recruiter and be like, hey, can I have a little bit more clarity on this to set yourself up for success? I actually know some hiring managers that kind of leave things a little confusing and very gray because they're hoping that you reach out and ask them some questions. All right, tip 6. So this one is kind of more general, but for this one, I would say don't over or underdress. So don't wear this to your interview. Don't wear a V-neck t-shirt, even if you're from South Florida like I am. It doesn't look professional. But I will say, as work from home is becoming more and more prominent, most interviews are done remotely via like a Zoom or a WebEx. So wearing a decent button down or a polo shirt is usually more than sufficient when it comes to the interview process. If you're a lady watching this, a nice top should be more than fine. 9 times out of 10, the hiring manager that's on the interview with me is just wearing a polo or even a t-shirt, just because people want to be comfortable when they're at home. So again, by you wearing a polo, by you wearing a button down should be plenty. I wouldn't wear a tie, I wouldn't wear a jacket, not for a technical type role like a sales engineer position. If it was in person, then yeah, maybe you would dress up a little bit more. But if it's remote, again, polo, button down, don't wear a V-neck t-shirt, doesn't look professional, and you should be good to go. Number 7, again, another more generic one, but take your interview from a nice, quiet location and have a decent webcam, have a decent microphone. You don't need one like this that's, super, super expensive. But really, this one should be obvious. But again, as somebody who's interviewed plenty of candidates before, I can't tell you how many times somebody's come in with a super blurry webcam. You hear a lot of background noise from their microphone, or you can barely hear them at all. And again, this is your very first impression that you leave with the hiring manager and even with the recruiter. So by investing in a $50 webcam, investing in a $25 to $50 mic that has some noise suppression for the background, you'll leave with a much better impression than just using your built-in laptop webcam as well as microphone. All right, so tip 8, the last tip I want to leave you all with, has less to do with the actual interview and more to do with when you actually receive the job offer. So at this point, typically you'll receive a verbal offer first, and they'll ask you things like, how do you still feel about the role? How did the interview process go? Are you still interested in the actual company and joining the team? If so, they'll continue to say, things like, we received some great feedback about you from the team. It was great to learn more about you. And then they would most likely say, hey, I want to extend you an offer. At this point, good for you. Congratulations. And by this point, they'll walk you through the logistics of the offer. So they'll include things like, hey, here's your salary. You're going to have a 70-30, 80-20 commission split. They might say like, hey, can you do this from a start date perspective? This is going to be your PTO, whether it be unlimited or 15 or 20 days, whatever the case may be. They'll walk you through all of that process. It's very easy from my experience as well, to get excited and accept the offer right away. Instead, what I would do is I would immediately, of course, extend your thank you saying, you had a really great time interviewing for the position. You're very excited to join the team. However, the only concern you have is that the salary came a little bit under of what you're hoping for. So, this is a bit of an uncomfortable conversation to have, especially if you haven't had this conversation before. The more you have this, again, from my own experience, the more comfortable you'll get with this. But you have to remember, when you're talking to a recruiter, especially who's extending the offer to you, they're professional negotiators. They deal with this all the time. And by this point, as you mention that to them, they'll most likely ask you, what's that ideal number? If we offered you, what's that ideal number to make you say yes right away? And by you giving them that number, whether it be another 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, they'll most likely say, okay, let me reach out to the team and I'll try to get back to you within the next 24 hours as an example. So most of the time, I have never had a situation where I've done this, and I do this on pretty much every single offer I get, where they pulled back the offer. Almost every time, I think every time except for maybe once or twice, they've come back to me with a higher number, maybe $10,000 or $20,000 more. So I would say always negotiate before you accept the offer right away. The only caveat to this is if you are brand new to the field and you just are going in to get that experience, you might want to hold back on negotiating. But even in that scenario, I still might ask for like $2, $3, $4, or $5,000 more, because it's more money in your pocket. It never hurts to ask. So definitely always go in, negotiate your salary when you get a job offer to set yourself up for success. All right, so that's all the tips I have for all of you. If you like today's video, would really appreciate if you give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit that little bell notification so you get notified every single time that I create a new video. This video is kind of new for me. I usually do just general tech videos, walkthroughs, but I want to do more of these generic videos to help all of you with the actual, joining, becoming a sales engineer. So again, if you like today's video, would really appreciate if you give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, let me know by writing in the comment box below. I'll try to answer those as quickly as possible. And yeah, that's it. Thanks guys for watching. Appreciate it.